Okay, welcome everybody. This is our webinar presenting some of the findings from the research project we ran last year to understand how people with a learning disability feel about money and finances. Hopefully you can all see the screen that I'm sharing. If anyone can't, please pop a message in the chat and we'll do our best to help. I'm joined today by my colleagues Sam and Gerard from Theora Trust, who were co-project managers on this project. I'll shortly be handing over to them to talk you through some of the findings and what they did on the project. To introduce myself, I'm Micah. I work for DOSH Financial Advocacy alongside my colleague Phil, who's also on the webinar today and will be joining us for some of the questions later on. And then the project also worked alongside University of Bristol and Professor Sharon Collard, who's also on the chat too, on the call to join us for the questions at the end. So it's a very collaborative project where we worked across 3 organisations to talk to people with a learning disability about their experiences. So today's webinar, we will start off with some welcome and introductions, just talk you through who we all are. And then I'll hand over to Sam and Gerard to give a bit of an overview of the project, what we did and what we found. And then there'll be some time at the end for you to ask questions and for us to have a discussion. Okay. Sam and Gerard, do you want to introduce yourselves and then fire away?
Okay, you go first, Sam.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sam. I am a co-researcher with the Bristol University, and me and Gerard worked on this project to see if people with learning disabilities and experts by experience knew about money and how they felt about it. Gerard?
Okay, yeah, so I worked on this with Sam through the middle part of last year. Sam and I worked together within Theora Trust as a pair anyway, so we were well used to working together, and that helped with the project and with dealing with the people that we were working with. So what we did was...
Gerard, just to let you know, your video is still off. You might want to
change that.
Back on.
I was hoping you wouldn't notice, Micah, but... Okay, there you go. I'm the beautiful one on the left. Yes, so in May and June last year, we used our contacts within Theora, who were all really, really helpful, and got together a group of people that we could talk to around how they felt about their money and how they felt from a well-being point of view with regard to their finances. We did this through 2 group workshops and then individual conversations with other people. We worked with a total of 16 people with lived experience of learning disability, and the calls, the meetings took around an hour and a half, and tried to make them as relaxing and as informative as we could do. Got to say that the people we worked with were brilliant, all had lots to tell us, and Sam and I enjoyed actually doing it. Next slide, please.
What people said, we asked people about 4 things. They are how they manage their money, spending and saving, report with benefits, and how they generally feel about their finances. So we wanted to know that, do they know what the finances do? Are they happy with their finances? Is there anything else is there anything they would like to change, or anything they would think they could find better? Right. How they manage their money. Most people had support from families and outside and outside organisations such as DOSH, who are independent financial advocate. Isn't that right, Gerald?
Yep, that is.
And some people had some support from other organisations, which I've mentioned, DOSH. Some support workers also help with people with day-to-day decisions on spending, minor, regular items, and with their record keeping. So basically, if they wanted to get bread, milk, cleaning products, any day-to-day, every day-to-day things we would have at home, so tea bags and milk, coffee, sugar, general cleaning products. Most people had their own bank account and card, and they felt a great sense of self-worth because they could use this card without having any help from anyone to go independently and draw cash out or go and pay for new clothes, shoes, whatever they wanted, really.
We'll come back to a point, but I'll run through it in basic terms now. Support workers who do a great job with all of these people, their involvement kind of covers two strands. One is to support the people day to day. So looking, as Sam said, at basic purchases and so on, making sure that they know what's happening, aren't taken advantage of, and so on. But then they also keep, and this is really important, the record keeping side of things for each individual, so that their finances are kept in control and working within whatever budgets the people are working to. And again, as Sam's pointed out, most of the people use their own bank cards and have their own bank account, but the support workers work helping them with that is crucial, and that's what enables them to have that degree of independence and growth of knowledge and understanding of what's happening with their finances.
Next slide, please, Michael, whenever you're ready. So everyone we spending and saving. So everyone we talked about said they had some choice about spending. So this covered the fact that they might want to go and get their favorite TV magazine or their favorite drink or snack or something for them. One person we talked to had a weekly budget that they could not go over. This was extremely frustrating for them. So I guess if you've got some money that you can't go over, it's really restricting in the fact that it only limits you to buy a certain amount of things, and this person obviously found it very, very frustrating, and I can see why. A few people had problems in the past because they were spending too much money, and this meant that they had to be careful about what they spent things on in the future, because if you overspend your money, then you're going to run out of money eventually. And this was one of the things we found out.
Okay, I mean, the things we'd add there is the second point Sam covered, which was around an individual that found some things particularly frustrating because of the way the weekly budget was worked for them. That was because there was that upper limit which they couldn't exceed, and we'll talk more about best interest decisions and the day-to-day decisions that are needed to keep the finances working within normal bounds. But obviously, if you have a strict upper limit, the processes that you have to go to exceed that for one reason or another can take time, and that helped and fed in. That didn't help and fed into the frustration for the individual. The other point, the last one, several of the people talked about having had problems with their budgeting and with their finances in the past. Two of them had really good stories about how that had been brought back into the right place by people such as financial advocates or family who help them with a more austere budget for a period of time, so that the financial difficulties eased and eventually went away. It was really good as well to hear the people talking about finances in those terms, because it showed the depth of their understanding and awareness of what money is about and the problems that can be caused by not managing your finances.
Thanks, Gerard. I think we have a hand up from somebody, Graham. Do you want to ask your question? Looks like you're muted at the moment.
Well,
there we go. What was the question? Sorry, Graham, I didn't quite catch that.
One of the problems you got
Sorry, I think it just broke up a bit coming through.
one of the problems you got is
beginning saying there was one of the problems we got, but I'm afraid it's cut out. I wonder, Graham, if you could use the Q&A button at the bottom. I understand that the chat may be disabled, but you should be able to use the Q&A button at the bottom. Type of question.
When someone wants to book like a swimming swimming pool, and they can't use a cash or card to find another way they can pay for their days out.
So you're saying that for some people it's difficult to find ways to pay to do activities like going to the swimming pool that they want to do. So whether they use cash or card.
Another days up.
Yeah. We've got some time at the end of this webinar where we can discuss a bit more some of the things we've found that help with challenges like that. So you can maybe bring that back and we can talk about that more at the end, if that's all right.
How do I get my camera on?
I'm not sure whether that's maybe something we can switch on at the end if we chat when we have the longer discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Barbara, I see you've got your hand up as well. Is there something you wanted to ask? You can potentially put it in the Q&A. You want to ask a question there. Okay, that's not coming through for now. So we'll continue with talking this through, Gerard and Sam, and then maybe anyone that's got questions, if you can either put them in the Q&A or bring them in at the end, and we'll have time to ask more questions then, just so that we don't lose our train of thought in talking.
Yeah, I think it's better for me and Gerard if we either the lovely people we have here put it in the Q&A or leave it until the end so we can just flow through this.
Yeah, we'll be able to make sure we answer all of your questions then at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
So over to you, Gerard.
Yep. Again, we were talking about the complexities of financial management for people with a lived experience. And one of the areas we were particularly interested in was around shared houses, because there can be several ways of dealing with budgeting and managing the finances for shared houses. So we did talk at length with the individuals around how that worked for them. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later on in the slides. But basically, shared houses operated mainly on a basis of having a shared budget for obvious household needs, so things like cleaning materials and so on, because that obviously worked in the most economical way for all of the individuals. But it was good also to hear that all of the shared houses made sure that individual choice remained in place, whether it was through food shopping or for personal items such as hobbies or activities that people wanted to take part in on an individual basis. The other area that was really interesting to talk about was the aspect of saving money. Again, it was really encouraging to hear that all of the people had an understanding of saving and what it could be used for. So, for example, holidays, bigger purchases, such as maybe a new TV for their room, and so on. So, the people's sort of positive attitude towards saving was really encouraging as well. Sam?
How do people do that? The most advantage of that.
Sorry, Graham, can we leave the questions to the end? Would that be all right? And we'll have a chat about them then. Thank you.
Sam, I think this is your slide, is it? Or am I losing track here?
I think it's your slide.
Okay.
You're going to
Grand.
talk about benefits and stuff from.
That's right. You're correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Looking at the other side, which is kind of, if you think of it in money terms, you've got the money out, so the spending, which is what we've been covering. But then we've also got to look at how the money comes in and where it comes in from. Now, again, all of the people we spoke to had an awareness that they relied on benefits of one form or another. Some elements of the benefits were much clearer and clearly played a more important part in the individual's lives. Other benefits, and the main obvious one is housing benefits, were perhaps not quite so clear and understood. That element that if your housing benefit claim for any reason has to stop or be amended, that could affect your living arrangements. But the more general PIP, universal credit, ESA type of benefits, they had clearly been well explained, and the individuals were supported to understand how they worked. Now, it was interesting that whilst some of the people we spoke to were helped by financial advocacy organisations, most of them were helped by family members. And for family members, that meant they were acting as either basic DWP appointees so that they could manage the benefit side of things for the person, for their son or daughter. There was also the option to have court of protection deputyship, which some family members had, or power of attorney. So a range of ways of supporting people with their benefits is in place. Probably a concern for Sam and I when we talked about things is that there needs to be some planning in place. Family members may not be around forever. Therefore, at some point, an alternative arrangement will need to be made for some individuals, and perhaps planning for that should be seen as a learning point from the project. There were amongst the 16 a few people who claimed their own benefits with support. So again, financial advocacy organisations will help people that they're supporting to make the claims and deal with any queries or problems. I did think I'd perhaps like one of those to support me with it, because I've always found dealing with the DWP an absolute nightmare. So anybody wants to volunteer, they can. Sam, over to you.
Okay. can I have the next slide, please, Micah? Thank you. As you can see, the faces are in red, amber, and green, which we use from our traffic light system that we do all our quality checks from. So most people, how the total list, how they generally feel about their finance. Most people we talked to felt good and felt some degree of some control over their finances. A few people felt all right about their finances, and some other people did feel concerned about aspect of their finances, such as, have I got enough money in the bank? Have I overdrawn? Is things costing me too much money to spend? Can I actually afford it? You know, so there was some real concern about finances, whether they had enough or they'd overspent or whether they could afford it, really, wasn't it? That was a general consensus, wasn't it, Gerard?
Yeah, very well described, Sam. I would say or add that a lot of the people we dealt with did feel concerned also about the rather strange faces that we produced to assess their
Yes,
response to this.
sorry in advance, people, but these are the best we could come up with.
I always think the red one looks rather shocked, but yeah.
No comment.
Yeah. So, yep. We're moving on.
Okay, what we learned. It can be difficult to talk about money, and we need to find better ways to make it fun, accessible, and relevant to people's day-to-day lives. People's lives are all different, and they need different amounts of support, including with their money and finances. So people who theory support are not just about the sport workers and everything else, are not just about supporting them with their day-to-day needs or whether they want to go swimming or walk the coast, where it's also about helping them with their finances and making sure that they know, how much money they've got in a bank and how much they're contributing to the household budget and what's going in and what's going out. So yeah, I say that all our support workers and all the people who get supported by our staff do a very good job. So people often get help with money from their family. With support workers may help them make day-to-day spending decisions.
So this was Sam. Was this where I think we were going to talk a bit about the best interest decision?
Yes,
and
yes,
that
that's what I was
side
going to
of-
say. Would you like to come in and give me a hand
Yeah.
with this one?
Sorry, Sam. Shouldn't have jumped in. Okay. Yeah, we wanted to just point out here that support workers can work on a day-to-day basis supporting people. So, have I got enough money to buy an extra bar of chocolate? Have I got enough money to buy the TV mag? Have I got money to buy perhaps a new book or something that they wanted? And that's absolutely fine and works great. There are bigger decisions. So one of the gentlemen gave us a really good example from in one of the workshops where he'd wanted to have a pet. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but it was
A
not
gecko, I
my sort
believe.
of pet. It was
It was a
one of these
gecko.
iguana-y type things. That's it, a gecko.
Yes, yeah.
And he talked us through the process that he'd gone through to get his family to agree to him making the purchase. So he looked at things like what would be the setup costs, and that would involve things like the tank for the iguana itself, or gecko, and then the ongoing costs. So how would you feed him? The light, electricity would end up having any effect on his household bills, and so on.
And
And
cleaning of
how
the
he put
cage
that
as
all.
well.
Sorry, Sam.
Cleaning of the tank or the cage or whatever you keep them
That's
going
it.
around.
Yeah. And he put all of that together with support and put that to his family. And they then looked through his finances and made the decision that the purchase could go ahead. Now, that's what's called a best interest decision. So there should be a decision maker contained within that process who will look at all of the relevant facts and information and will then make a decision as to whether that purchase is in the individual's best interest. And that's where things can become more complicated, more involved. The most common ones that you see for best interest decisions are things like holidays, which are clearly a much bigger expense than would normally be seen. And that's when having good support workers and financial advocacy and having what's called a circle of support operating around an individual to help them with that. Sam, back to you.
Yeah. Can I have the next slide, please, Micah? Thank you. People, what we learned part 2, people can get frustrated if they don't get to decide how they'd like to spend their money. And this is a really important thing, that if people don't get a choice, and we're in theory, we're all about choice and how they design their support plans and what they really want and what they want from their staff. So if they don't get that, then they'll get frustrated. So making sure that people get a choice of how much to spend and what they want to spend the money on is really important to people. People also can get into problems with their money if they spend too much or if someone takes advantage of them. Gerald, you have a story about this, I believe.
Yeah, we can give you a good example of that. One thing just to clarify point 4, which Sam's just run through as well, is it's about, we had a couple of quite long conversations in the workshops on this, and people agreed that it's not about whether they can't spend the money on something when they want to. It's about being involved in the decision that leads up to that point. I just think that's really important because, again, it shows people who are in tune with the financial side of things. But same as all of us, they can get frustrated and they can find it difficult when perhaps the budget doesn't stretch as far as we would like. Yeah, the business of that Sam was saying is an important one, and we encountered probably just a couple of examples, but the main one was somebody taking advantage. And yeah, there are obvious examples of that. An easy one that lots of support workers will tell you about is that if individuals go out perhaps to pubs, and they will have people that are called friends who will come up and talk to them in the pub, expect them to buy them a drink, but won't reciprocate. But the one we had was a slightly different one and a more involved one, where 2 people shared a house, and one of the people, everything began all right, started okay, but then one of the 2 began to not contribute to the electricity and gas bills, started to expect the other person to pay for the food shopping on their own, and then would start to do things like take their food from the fridge, take their food from the cupboard and do it. So that in the end, one of the individuals was having not just financial problems, but was actually getting physically ill because they were struggling with getting enough food and drink. And eventually somebody stepped in and action was taken and the situation was resolved. Again, interestingly, it was really interesting to hear that the individual, it had changed the individual who had been being abused financially in that way, about how they viewed money and how they looked after their finances. He had gone from somebody who was relatively easygoing, relied on his support workers where needed, to somebody who focused very much every day on what he spent his money on, how much money he had in his bank, and so on. So just thought that was a really interesting bit of work that we picked up from the project. Sam?
Another company that
Sorry, Graham, can I just jump in here, please? Thank you.
one of the new companies that areas start taking person's credit card by mistake and trying to we have had instances where the people's money have been taken as another financial abuse.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, thanks, Graham. We've got in a couple of slides, we've got some time where we can discuss some of those issues more, if that's
Yeah.
all right. So if you can hold your point on till then, that would be really helpful.
And just quickly to go back to my point that I was originally going to clarify just before Graham jumped in there. He was also ill from all the stress of having this person take advantage of him, not because of just not eating it. The whole situation of someone taking advantage of you takes a real toll on your body, and it really, really makes you, not just physically but mentally, it takes a toll on you as well. And he was very suspicious of everyone and anyone else, and didn't trust anyone. And I don't blame him, really.
Okay.
Can we go to the next slide, please, Micah? So, our reflections. Most people didn't talk about learning new skills around money and gaining more independence in the future.
So Sam, I'll chip in a bit here. So these are kind of our thoughts in terms of things that perhaps we didn't hear while we were talking to individuals, and perhaps things to look at for the future to try and improve people's financial well-being. And this point is, was really the key one, which is all of the people we talked about were great about their support and that they had people there to help them. But there was kind of a bit of a gap around their learning new skills about how they can manage their own money, or being encouraged to build their own independence around financial transactions. Sorry, Sam, you go on now.
Okay, and this is what we learned. It says this would help address some of the concerns around not making decisions around money. It would be good to have more about promoting independence. Oh, have you read all of that, Gerald?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, Sam.
And to the last point, the most important thing is we could train our staff. We could train our theatre staff by what we found to be used in staff inductions, in person-centered plan meetings, in houses, and other stuff. Is there anything else you can think of, Gerard?
No, I think that's right. Sorry, Sam, I messed this slide up for you. It's my fault.
It is what it is, mate. It's all right. It's all
good. Yeah, I think the person-centered planning is an interesting one. Again, when we talk, because often the staff were attending these workshops, and they talked about the person-centered plans, and people clearly had them. They clearly had areas where the staff were working on those person-centered plans, but virtually nothing at all around finances. So our kind of drive was that people should have a section in their person-centered plans which says, this is where this individual is now in terms of their independence and financial well-being, and this is how we can help them move forward and gain more confidence and more control. So yeah, I think that tidies that up, Sam. Yeah.
Yep. Is there a next slide, Micah? Lovely.
Thank you both. That's really useful to have heard that. Just a couple of points I was going to pull out, and then we'll move into a bit of discussion and questions for those of you listening along. So firstly, we mentioned, or Sam Gerard mentioned in that we were focusing, or with the people we spoke to mostly had support from a theatre parent support organisation, but we think the conclusions and the information that we got would apply beyond theatre to any to other people who either don't have support or do have support from another provider. And the other thing that we were talking a lot about within the project was financial well-being, and what we initially set out to understand was what impacts on people's financial well-being. And what we noticed, and Sam and Gerard, please jump in if I've remembered this, but that there was part of it depended on their level of understanding as to what they were aware of being potentially a risk or a problem with finances, how much they understood, what income they had, or perhaps how close to going into the red they were. But we also, that idea of balance, and that was also came through, I think, in talking about having the right amount of support and safeguards for people. So I think we saw, and the examples you've just given, showed that you can have both too much and too little.
Yeah.
That you could have some people that perhaps had too much control or not enough involvement, and found that frustrating, and that negatively impacted their financial well-being and their opportunities to use their money. But you could also have too little support around money, and people then were at much higher risk of make crime, of not claiming the right benefits to get the income they needed, of being at risk of financial abuse, etc. So there was a real, I think one of the things that I took from what people said was there was that balance of keeping people involved with the money in the right way for them, involving them in the way that works for them and their managing, how anxious they maybe feel about money or what they want to do with it. And keeping that, and I suppose this links to the point you just made, that is dynamic, if that's the right word, that can change over time. So rather than starting with this is how this person was when we first got to know them, and that's how we're always going to support them, actually over time maybe we've managed to support them to feel less anxious about money, to understand a little bit more. That means we can change how we support them. They might be able to learn new skills or do a bit more in the future. So it's keeping that approach to how you support somebody with money very, very much flexible and live, and looking at it again and again. And also, of course, that is part of the financial services and everything. The whole world around them is changing all the time. So what you set up 10 years ago might have been a great solution 10 years ago, and now the local bank branch is closed, or they want to do online shopping or whatever it is, and it's no longer as good as it was. So looking at different options and what works now for that individual, for their current circumstances, for the things they're trying to do, rather than having a very sort of static or rigid approach to supporting somebody.
Absolutely right. That was the driver for Sam and I's thoughts around the person-centered planning. That you need to have very often when people start out in support, they will have plans put in place which helps them with medication, plans put in place which helps them with their diet, general health, but you very rarely see one that says this is the person's current position, as you've just highlighted, in financial terms, and this is where perhaps they could move to. And that's what we'd like to see a bit more of. And that will ease that frustration that you referred to, and make those individuals better able to engage with their community and to be part of life along with all the rest of us.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Right,
time to open up the floor to any questions you might have about what we've said and what we've found. And then on the next slide, we've got a few discussion questions, which we'll share if we've got time to move on to those. We can, if you want to put your question in the Q&A, actually, I've got some already in there. Brilliant. So I will open those up. I'm afraid we can't, we can unmute you if you wanted to ask your question verbally, but we can't switch the video on because the way this is set up as a webinar. But so apologies for that, but you can type it into the questions. So I'll have a look at those first. If anyone would prefer to speak, then you can put your hand up and we'll come to those. Okay, let me have a look at these questions. So did the research show any examples of where family or support workers felt that they needed a level of access to the person's account, I presume bank account, in order to provide the right level of support with everyday payments, but were prevented from having that access if there was no power of attorney or deputyship?
Do you want me to pick that one up, Sam?
Yeah, because you know
Yeah,
more about
yeah.
this than I do, mate. So yeah, please.
Yeah, no, we didn't, would be probably the simple answer to that. All of the people that we had as part of this survey had the family links sort of supported by the legal requirements, so court of protection, power of attorney. Those that had financial advocates in place, that was all being dealt with correctly with the right thing. So no, but I do, as a parent and having worked in this field for a while, know that it does happen. That and that can kind of take two forms. One can be that the regulations and requirements that are in place make life very difficult for somebody to support their son, daughter, relative in the way that's needed. But there can also be situations where family members get into difficulty because they don't follow the regulations and don't follow the requirements. So, yeah, I know what you're thinking probably there.
Thanks, Gerard. We've got a couple of other questions on this topic around that sort of how people use bank accounts and cards and whatever other solutions for accessing money day to day and sort of practically being able to spend things. Did people in the sessions where you were talking to them, did they talk about how they practically do that day to day, whether they have their own cards and whether that was working?
Yeah. Sam, do you want to start on that and then I'll back you up with it?
Yeah, I do believe that some people had their own cards and they went down and they drew money out when they needed it, or they went and used their card for various things. I mean, I guess it's a regular occurrence because they're still using them now, I think. And yeah, I think it happened, Gerard.
Yeah. I think Micah's point earlier around the business of people's different levels of ability comes into play there. So we had individuals within the project who use their cards pretty independently, and probably the fallback for them in terms of making sure they didn't get into difficulties fell into the record keeping side of things, so that they would keep receipts for themselves which could then be passed to the support workers afterwards and kept in their record sheets. Others would need much more input from the support workers to help them go out and actually use the card. But people on the project talked about remembering their pins, how they went to cash machines and drew cash. Others talked about how it could be difficult in the shops if assistants weren't what's the terminology, familiar with the transaction they were making, and perhaps didn't help the individual as much. But then we all encounter that in shops quite regularly. So that they were very independent. We were really pleased on that side to hear how much they did themselves.
Thanks, Gerald.
Any
That's really
more?
useful.
Any more in the Q&A, Micah?
Yeah, I will share. I was just going to add, on in terms of the bank cards, I wonder whether for many people, once they found a solution that worked, the initial setup difficulties were a distant memory, or those that were using it day to day weren't sort of so involved in the initial some of that setup. So they focused on, yeah, it's working now and it's great, rather than perhaps being aware that it was difficult to do at the time, or might be a more precarious setup than you'd have ideally and might change in the future. There was maybe not that awareness of all the rules and regulations around quite how have we got this set up. It was more, this is working for now, so we're not going to challenge it.
Yeah. Don't change what ain't broken, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think two things I'd say about it, Sam, because I think you're right. That phrase you just used is very much what happens. and it's what we think should be challenged to a degree, which is, you know, people with a lived experience of learning disability, they're used to life making them accept the kind of this is the way it is. Yeah. So I would like to see them challenged more to look at what could it be for you, and that's what I think financially we should be encouraging people to look at doing for these people. And one other thing to reassure Micah so that she doesn't frown at me too much is something we haven't talked about, which is risk assessments, and all of that training, all of that work with it has to be risk assessed, because you can't just blindly push forward, say, here you go, you know, complete control of your money, and then everything goes pear-shaped. So risk assessment's crucial as part of the process of training and developing an individual's independence.
Absolutely. And the last question we've got around, well, there's two people have asked, but around banks was, did anyone mention anything about branches closing and that being a challenge? Do you remember?
Funnily enough, no. Sam,
No.
go on.
Not that I can recall, no. But
I
since
know.
then, local branches have closed. So
I think the closing of local branches will be noticed more. I think we were probably just, because it was a fairly small sample, so I think we were probably perhaps lucky in that. One lady did refer to her cash point that she had always used had gone, and that presumably was related to the branch closing. And again, without it's, you know, not away from the project, but, you know, my own personal experience has been that, yeah, the branch closures can cause huge problems with supporting your relative.
Thanks, Gerald. I'll pick up a few other questions, and then if we've got time, we can always circle back to that. So somebody's asked, overall, did the people that you spoke to have enough money to enjoy life?
Sam, what do you think on that one?
I think 99% of the people did. 1% didn't because they were restricted with how much they got. And that really put a downer on things because this one person was totally restricted, and therefore what you have is what you have, and therefore you can't spend anymore. So on the whole, I would say yes, but in equal balance, the other person who couldn't spend, you know, what they were given, or couldn't have more than what they were given, I don't think they would be too happy about it. Gerald?
Yeah, I think, you know, bearing in mind, you know, that these individuals are all relying on benefits. They're not, none of the people we referred to, a couple of them had other employment. So they will have had, other employment, paid employment. So they will have had some additional funds coming in. But generally, the people were relying entirely on benefits. I think, again, probably the two things I'd say is, one, that point again of people with learning disabilities learning to, this is the way it is, this is how. So I think, you know, they could have a better life with potentially more funds coming in. I think because they're supported to look at things like saving and planning ahead, I think that takes a bit of the sting out of it, because then they're not in a position where, no, you can't do this. They're in a position where they say, well, let's plan for it, let's save for it. And that, I think, is, you know, helps them a lot. I think, you know, generally, the sharing of houses helps as well, because the cost of living is being spread down through the group. And also, again, you know, kudos to support workers. They manage that well, and they manage to do it by still allowing choice, but also by looking at sensible planning around meals and what is given. Healthy diets is a big thing for the individuals, and, you know, that means they're not just wasting their money. Sorry, this is a personal thing, I suppose. Anyway, wasting money on, processed food all the time. Staff are looking to get in healthy vegetables for them to eat and to make meals from those vegetables. So I think, I wouldn't want to. I think Sam's right. Most of the people he spoke to within the project were happy, but I think there are reasons why that is.
Okay, thanks both. Completely different question now. We had a question asking Sam and Gerard your experience of working as co-researchers. Is this something you'd like to do again in the future? And what do you think were the benefits of having someone with lived experience on the research team?
Ooh.
Sam, do you want to say first?
Yeah. To be completely honest, this whole situation came out of the blue. It came in an external email, and I was looking at it, and I thought, well, and then Jared called me and said, "Hey, Sam, you can actually becoming a co-researcher. I think it'd be really good." And I wasn't sure at first, to be honest. I was like, man, not really my bag. But then I thought, I've got nothing to lose. If I go for the interview, I've got nothing to lose. And if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. At least I've, tried something different. And on the 22nd of December, when I came back from Longleat with my nephews, I found out I got the job, and it was great. And since then, it's been really good. It's helped me understand money a bit more, helped me understand that I do have a card and there is a limit, and some things do cost more, so therefore you have to every now and again tighten your belt, as it were. As a co-researcher, would I want to do this project again? Yeah, I really, really, really want to work with Bristol University again at some point, if they'll have me, and hopefully Micah and Thera and that maybe in the future might contact me again. You don't know whatever comes out of an opportunity. You just got to take it and run with it, and hopefully something good will come out of it at the end of it. And who knows, I might get invited back. You just don't know. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with my wingman, Jared. It's been a real pleasure because A, he's a good mate. B, we work well together, and C, he has experience of finance. So I tend to use people who have experience in the field that I'm trying to get involved with. So helps me out a great deal. So thanks, Gerald, for this. Thanks to Bristol University, and thanks to Zero Trust for having me.
I'd probably try and answer that slightly different. I'm a project manager. I have been, for a number of years. So I've done project work before, and I have to say that working with somebody with a lived experience has been brilliant for me. I think it makes the project, this sort of project where you're engaging with people with a lived experience, it makes it work much, much better. And Sam gives you a completely different viewpoint. The way, I look at things, it's from a certain angle, but working with Sam, he's always got a different slant. And, when you put the two together, you come up with something that's better. And I've really enjoyed doing it with Sam. And for other people who are thinking about it, definitely give it a shot.
Oh yeah, you'd be stupid not to.
Thank you both. Yeah, I certainly agree that it gives you a different conversation the more the people that are actually on the ground and involved as well, because you also have that experience of working directly with people through your other roles as well. Both
and
of
as a person with lived experience, working with people with lived experience, I do spot things that other people don't, I have to say. And I just wanted to be completely honest that the question was asked. So yeah, there you go. That's my history about this project.
Thank you, Sam.
And I'll do it again in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
I'm conscious that we're coming up to the end of our time. We've got a few more questions. We've got some discussion prompts on the next slide, but I will probably just leave those up at the end for people to go away and think about, because we've had lots of discussion through this. So a quick answer, if you can. Did anyone talk about using different ways to pay? So things like using their mobile phone instead of a card. Does that come up at all?
Not
to any great degree. I know, talking away from one of the actual workshops, one of the participants did talk to me briefly about using the phone apps and so on. I mean, as you mentioned, Micah, the financial world, the way we deal with money changing every day for everybody. And, you know, I think a bit of a challenge for the poor old support workers on that one is, how's that going to actually work? But yeah.
So no, yeah, just to back Gerald up, no one has ever said, "Oh, by the way, I use, for example, Apple Pay or whatever Samsung have got." We didn't have any of that. No, I can 110% say with all certainty, no. The answer is definitely not.
Lovely. And a last question, if those of you that haven't had a chance to get to, apologies, if you want to type them in, then we'll pick them up afterwards if there's any particular questions. The last one, Relief, is that have you seen any examples about what good support looks like? And I think this links into one of the discussion points we were going to leave people with to think about. So what, maybe Sam and Gerard, you can just, or indeed Sharon and Phil as well, if you want to jump in with any examples of good support around money.
I'll stay quiet, let Philippa have Sharon a go if they want. If they don't, then just say, and I'll start waffling again. All right.
Sam, is there anything you remember from the workshops that you were in that people, good examples?
Good example. Well, the people that turned up. I mean, the people who turned up, and the people who actually took part in this, and the people who came out on their day-to-day lives actually came and tried something different. So for me, that's a win.
I think good support. I think we saw a lot of commitment from support workers
Yes.
to making sure that the financial side of the life worked for the people they supported. I think there are two challenging areas for them. I think one is about advocacy for the individuals, challenging the world out there. So if for a simple example of somebody having a branch closure, they should be voicing their concerns and frustrations with that in the same way as we would, and staff need to always be looking at that advocacy side of things. My daughter's in a wheelchair. Yeah, the number of shops I go into now where they've stuck all those flaming cardboard display units so that you can't get through. Yeah, and it's that, that sort of advocacy where you say, well, actually, can you move that box so that my daughter can get to the other end of the shop? So it's those sort of things. But I think in general, the support workers we saw were really committed, worked hard, and I think some imagination and new ideas on how people can learn about money and get comfortable with it.
Lovely, thank you. I'm conscious we've come to the end of our time, so we will call it to an end there. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. Thanks to Sam and Gerard for talking us through the project and their thoughts and answering all those questions. And I'll leave you with those questions that we've got on the discussion there. Just have a think about, in your context, however you work, how can we support people more to have different opportunities to learn, to build their skills around money? What could we do next? We're always interested in your ideas. If you can see an opportunity following this, we'd love to develop our research and these ideas further. So do get in touch. And thank you very much to everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, well done, you lot. Well done. Thank you very much for all coming.